Hey, my name is Avery Langston. I'm 24 years old, and this is my story. I used to think that being the quiet one in the family meant peace, that if I didn't cause trouble, didn't raise my voice, didn't ask for too much, maybe I'd be loved just the same. Maybe I'd be noticed, respected, chosen. But I was wrong. This is the story of how my parents threw me aside over and over again for my older sister, and how they came crawling back when everything they had crumbled into dust. What they didn't know was, I had already built something much stronger than what they ever gave me, and by the time they needed me most, the sweet, obedient daughter they once ignored was long gone. It all started in Jackson, Mississippi. I was born and raised here, in a 2-story colonial-style house on Woodrow Street. White shutters, wraparound porch, the works. My parents, Sylvia and Grant Langston, were both school teachers, well-liked in the community, always hosting church potlucks or school fundraisers. People loved them, said we were the perfect Southern family, but that was only if you didn't look too close. Let me know in the comments where you're watching this from. I'd love to hear your story too. And if you're still with me, don't forget to like and subscribe to see how I turned rejection into resilience. And then there was her, my older sister, Meredith, 5 years older, always shining, the one everyone admired. Meredith was everything my parents wanted: a pageant queen, debate champion, honor roll student. Her photo was in the local paper so often it might as well have had its own column. And me? I was just Avery. Quiet, bookish, good at art, but not remarkable. I wasn't failing school or getting into trouble. I just didn't sparkle the way Meredith did. I didn't perform for praise. Still, I kept hoping maybe one day they'd say they were proud of me, maybe just once, that my drawings were beautiful, that my silence wasn't a flaw, that I was enough. But that moment never came. Instead, everything was about Meredith, her senior prom. I had to sew the hem of her custom dress by hand because our mom didn't trust anyone else with it. Her birthday parties, lavish, themed, expensive. Mine, a grocery store cake, maybe a gift card, and don't make a mess. Even when I graduated high school with honors, they skipped my ceremony to attend a sorority reunion for Meredith. The older I got, the clearer it became. I was invisible unless I was useful. Meredith was the golden child. I was just the girl who folded laundry and stayed out of the way. By the time I was 18, I couldn't take it anymore. I packed my bags and left. No dramatic farewell. No begging me to stay. Just a simple, "Take care of yourself," from my father, as he handed me $20 like it was charity. I moved into a tiny apartment above a bookstore downtown. I worked part-time shelving books and waited tables on weekends. It wasn't glamorous, but for the first time I could breathe. College wasn't an option. Not because I didn't get in, but because my parents said they could only afford to send one daughter to school. And of course, that daughter was Meredith. "She's got potential, Avery," my mom had told me, not even flinching. "She could really make something of herself. You'll understand one day." I didn't. I still don't. But I started building something on my own. I began freelancing as a graphic designer, teaching myself Photoshop, illustration, even coding. It was lonely, exhausting, but I was determined. I was never going to need them again. And that's when I met Elijah. He was everything I wasn't used to. Kind, consistent, curious about me. Not Meredith. Me. We met at a local coffee shop I used to work at. He saw me sketching on my break and asked if I sold my work. No one had ever asked that before. It caught me so off guard, I didn't even know how to answer. A few months later, he became my first client. Then my boyfriend. Then my business partner. Together, we built a design agency from the ground up. Langston and Gray Creative. And within 2 years, we had contracts with real estate firms, political campaigns, even universities. I went from scraping rent to managing employees. I bought a car, then a house, a small modern place in Bellhaven, not too far from where I grew up, but miles away in every other sense. Meanwhile, Meredith had moved to Atlanta. She bounced between jobs and relationships, always chasing the next big thing, always calling home for help. And my parents? They kept bailing her out. Loans, favors, even mortgaging the house once to pay off one of her debts. Still, they never called me. Never checked in, not even once. But the thing about karma? It's patient. It was a rainy Tuesday morning when I got the first call. I recognized the number immediately. My parents' landline. I let it ring. Then came the voicemail. "Avery, this is your father. We need to talk. Please, call us back." I stared at the phone, heart pounding. Not because I was excited or scared, but because I knew. Something had finally gone wrong. Something big enough to make them remember I existed. I didn't call back. Not right away. I waited. 2 more voicemails followed. Then an email. Then Meredith called. Avery, please, we need your help. Mom and Dad are in serious trouble. Apparently, Meredith had gotten involved with a man running some shady investment business. She convinced my parents to put money into it, all their savings. Even took out a second mortgage on the house again. It was a scam, a massive one. And now they were on the verge of losing everything. House, retirement, reputation. They needed $128,000. Fast. And guess who they came to? Me. The daughter who didn't go to college because they couldn't afford it. The daughter who wasn't chosen. I listened as they begged. Literal tears from my mother. My father stammering through apologies like they were foreign on his tongue. Meredith silent in the background. I asked them why they came to me. My mother whispered, because you're the only one who's ever been responsible. I don't know what hurt more, the betrayal I had already lived through, or the realization that they knew all along who I was, and still chose someone else. I told them I needed time to think, but deep down, I already knew what I was going to do. They thought I would be the same girl I once was, quiet, forgiving, eager to please. But they forgot something. I had learned to stand without them, and I was done being their backup plan. I didn't answer their calls after that. Not for days. I just let them pile up, voicemail after voicemail, messages from my parents' house, a place I hadn't set foot in for nearly 6 years. Each message had a different tone. The first ones were polite, then apologetic, then urgent, then angry, then broken. I listened to each one on my headphones while sketching on my tablet, pretending that if I just stayed busy enough, none of it would reach me. But the truth is, I was listening to every word. I wanted to hear them squirm. I wanted to hear my father stumble over the pride he'd spent decades polishing like his old Buick. I wanted to hear my mother cry not because of Meredith's mistakes, but because of her own. They sounded smaller than I remembered, weaker, but I didn't feel sorry for them. Not yet. Elijah noticed something was off by the third day. We were supposed to meet a potential client over brunch, a hotel brand from New Orleans looking to rebrand, and I could barely focus. He caught me staring at my phone screen, that familiar number glowing. He didn't ask right away, just drove me home after the meeting, let the silence stretch. But as soon as we pulled into the driveway, he killed the engine and looked over. "It's your family, isn't it?" I nodded. "Are they okay?" I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because I didn't know how to explain it without unraveling. They need money. A lot. They lost everything trying to save Meredith from another disaster. He didn't look shocked. Not really. He knew some of the story, enough to understand why the name Meredith made me tense up like a fist. And now they want you to fix it. They expect me to, I said bitterly, like it's my duty. Elijah leaned back in his seat, thoughtful. What are you going to do? And that was the question, wasn't it? What was I going to do? I could have wired them the money. I had it. Not in cash, but I could liquidate some assets, call in a favor, shift some contracts. It wouldn't destroy me, but it would cost me something far more valuable than money. My self-respect. Because helping them wouldn't just be a favor. It would be erasing every moment they made me feel worthless. It would be letting them win again, letting them write the story the way they always had. Meredith shines. Avery rescues. The end. I couldn't live with that. Not anymore. So I came up with a plan. First, I asked them to meet me. Not at their house. I chose a neutral place. A small, quiet coffee shop off Capitol Street. Public enough to keep emotions from boiling over. Quiet enough for me to control the room. I texted my dad the details. Meet me Thursday at noon. Come alone. He replied within minutes. We'll be there. I ignored the plural. Of course they'd both show up. Of course they'd ignore even this one boundary. Thursday came. I arrived early, ordered black coffee, sat in the corner booth by the window. I wore black jeans, a gray blazer, and no makeup. I wanted to look sharp, untouchable, like someone they didn't recognize anymore. When they walked in, they looked nothing like the parents I remembered. My mother's hair had lost its shine, pulled back into a frazzled bun. Her eyes were puffy. My father's shoulders were slumped, suit wrinkled, eyes bloodshot. They looked like people who had been humbled but not healed. They sat across from me like I was a stranger. For a second, no one said anything. Then my mom reached across the table. "Avery," she whispered, voice cracking. "Thank you for meeting with us." I didn't touch her hand. "Let's skip the pleasantries. Tell me what happened." They exchanged a glance, then started to unravel the story. Meredith had met a man named Carter at a business seminar in Atlanta. He was charming, ambitious, claimed to be launching a startup that would revolutionize home security. Meredith wanted in, told my parents it was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. They resisted at first, but she pushed, she cried. She blamed her past failures on not having enough support, said this time would be different, if they believed in her. So, they gave in. They invested nearly everything. Carter disappeared 6 months later. Fake name, fake company, fake everything. Now the mortgage was overdue. The house was under threat. Their retirement funds were gone, and they had no one else to turn to. And what about Meredith? I asked finally. My mother blinked. She's devastated. No, I said coldly. Where is she? My father cleared his throat. She's in Atlanta, trying to find him. She's broken Avery. She's not the villain here. I leaned back, arms crossed. She's not the villain? She didn't mean for this to happen. No, she just let it happen. Again. And you let her. My voice was steady, but inside I was shaking. My mother started to cry again. We know we've made mistakes. We know we weren't fair to you. I said nothing. We were wrong, my dad added, about so much. And we're sorry. We truly are. I looked at them for a long time, at their hollow expressions, at the desperation buried beneath the apologies. They weren't just sorry. They were afraid, not of losing their home, but of losing me. And in that moment, I realized something powerful. I held all the cards, so I made them an offer. I'll help you, I said, but not with money. They looked confused. I'll buy the house, pay off the debts, but it becomes mine. You can stay in it, rent-free, for 1 year. After that, we reassess. You sign over ownership to me. No more loans, no more chances. And Meredith never asks me for anything. Ever. My father's jaw tightened. That's extreme. No, I said. That's mercy. My mother looked like she wanted to protest, but then she saw my face, and she nodded. We'll do it, she whispered. Whatever it takes. I stood up. I'll have the papers drawn. You'll get them next week. They tried to thank me. I didn't let them. I walked out of that coffee shop taller than I'd ever been in my life, because for once I made the terms. I set the rules, and they had no choice but to accept. But deep down, I knew this wasn't the end. It wasn't even close. Because people like Meredith, they don't disappear. They regroup, and they come back for more. The contract was signed by the following Tuesday. Elijah helped me draw it up with our legal advisor, ensuring every clause was airtight. The house would legally be transferred to me in exchange for full debt coverage. My parents would be allowed to stay for 1 year, and then a formal agreement would determine their next steps, whether they'd continue renting under new terms or vacate the property altogether. I didn't tell them, but I wasn't planning to evict them. That wasn't my revenge. My revenge was owning the very place where I had once been invisible. My revenge was knowing they were now under my roof, literally. For a while, things were quiet. I paid off the debts, settled the back mortgage, set up automatic payments for property tax. I even paid off a couple of the small liens they hadn't mentioned during our meeting. Medical bills, a credit card maxed out at a clothing boutique Meredith once raved about. I didn't say anything. I just watched as the balance of power silently shifted, and they felt it too. My father became hesitant on phone calls. My mother overly polite, cautiously thankful. Every message started with, "We really appreciate everything you've done for us, Avery." It was like they were trying to reintroduce themselves, but I wasn't interested in making room for them anymore. I was managing an agency, training a new hire, organizing an expansion to Memphis. I had a life now, and I didn't need them in it. But then Meredith came back. It was mid-June, and the Mississippi heat was pressing down on the city like a punishment. I was reviewing logo drafts when I got a text from my mother. "Meredith's in town. She wants to come by, just for dinner. Please don't be upset." I stared at the message for a long time before setting the phone face down. That was their way. Inform after the fact. Never ask. Meredith was always an uninvited guest who expected a welcome mat. That same evening, I got a call from Elijah. He had stopped by the old house to drop off a document my parents had forgotten to sign for the transfer. When I picked up, he sounded tense. "She was there," he said. "Meredith. Of course she was." "What did she say?" I asked. "She tried to act like nothing happened, gave me that fake smile, asked if we were still playing house in Belhaven. Then she asked if you'd let her move in. Said the place is technically yours now anyway." My throat tightened. "She what?" "She said she's broke. Can't find Carter. She's in between jobs again. But she made it sound like she was entitled to your help." I should have expected it. But somehow, hearing it out loud made it worse. The audacity, the absolute lack of shame. After everything she had cost them, and me, she still saw herself as the center of the story. I drove to the house the next day, not to see Meredith, to end it. My mother opened the door before I even knocked. Her face was lined with anxiety, eyes darting behind me like she expected me to come with a lawyer or a storm. "She's here," she whispered, "but she said she'll leave if you want her to." That was supposed to be comforting. It wasn't. Meredith was in the living room, lounging on the same couch we used to fight over as kids. Her hair was shorter now, chin length, the blonde dye faded. She wore a silk robe like she'd just stepped out of a spa, not like someone couch surfing on borrowed time. "Avery," she said, rising to hug me. I stepped back. "Don't." Her smile faltered. "Okay, fine. I get it. You're mad." "I'm not mad," I said. "I'm done." She tilted her head. "Look, I didn't come here to fight. I came because, well, I don't have anywhere else to go, and this is still home. It's my house," I corrected. "I paid for it. I saved it. And you? You lost that right a long time ago." My father stood quietly in the doorway. He looked like he wanted to defend her. He didn't. Meredith scoffed. "So what? You're gonna kick me out? After everything I've been through? You mean everything you've caused?" I asked. That hit her. For a second, her confidence cracked. "I didn't mean for this to happen. But it did," I said. "And you let it. You dragged them down again, and when it collapsed, you expected me to fix it, just like they did." "I'm your sister," she said, softer now. "No," I replied. "You're someone I used to know." There was a long silence. Then she dropped her gaze. I was scared. I could have said so many things. I could have reminded her of the stolen birthdays, the ruined holidays, the sacrifices I made because she always came first. I could have thrown every childhood wound in her face. But I didn't, because I saw something in her that I'd never seen before. Regret. Not enough to change her, but enough to weaken her. And that was enough for me. I told her she had 48 hours to leave. No exceptions, no extensions. My mother cried. My father said nothing. Meredith stared at me like she didn't recognize who I was anymore. But that was the point. 2 days later, she was gone. No goodbye note, no apology, just silence. Weeks passed. My parents stayed quiet. They didn't fight the terms of the deal. They kept the house clean, answered my messages on time, even started planting flowers out front like they were trying to rebuild something from the roots. But I didn't visit. Instead, I poured myself into work. I hired 2 new designers, opened a satellite office in Baton Rouge, started a mentorship program for young women who wanted to break into tech and design. I called it The Quiet Ones. And that was when the second turning point hit. A local newspaper did a feature on me. The woman behind Langston and Gray, from bookstore clerk to branding powerhouse. My face on the cover. My story inside. For the first time, the community didn't just know me as Meredith's sister or Sylvia and Grant's other daughter. They knew me. My inbox filled with messages, clients, offers, invitations to speak. But one message stood out. It was from a girl named Clara, 17 years old, from Jackson. She wrote, "I read your story. My sister is like Meredith. My parents don't see me either. But now I know that doesn't mean I'm invisible. Thank you." I stared at that message for a long time. Then I cried. Not because I was sad, but because I finally understood something I hadn't before. My story wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclamation. I had taken back my name, my space, my voice, and I had given it to someone else. Someone like me, who thought being quiet meant being lesser. But there's power in silence. And I was just getting started. I didn't expect peace to feel so unfamiliar. In the weeks following Meredith's departure, the house grew still. My parents, to their credit, respected the boundaries I had laid out. No sudden calls, no surprise visits, no asking for anything beyond what was agreed upon. For the first time in my life, I wasn't bracing for another betrayal. And yet, the quiet unsettled me. It was like waiting for thunder after lightning. Instinct told me another storm was coming, even as the skies cleared. I channeled that unease into progress. Work became more than a passion. It was a mission. The mentorship program I'd started, The Quiet Ones, was picking up traction. Girls from all across Mississippi began writing in, asking how to get involved. Some wanted to be artists, some coders, some entrepreneurs. Most of them had one thing in common. They'd been overlooked, underestimated, or silenced. Every Thursday evening, I met with a group of them over Zoom, and eventually in person, in a small rented studio space downtown. We sat in circles, laptops open, notebooks filled, ideas spilling out faster than we could organize them. I saw in them pieces of who I'd once been, eager, capable, and tired of waiting to be chosen. And that's when I realized the most powerful thing I could do was teach them not to wait at all. "You're not here to be picked," I told them one night. "You're here to build something so strong, they regret ever overlooking you." Those girls clapped and cheered, and I smiled. But deep down I knew. I wasn't just talking to them. I was talking to myself. Still, healing wasn't linear. One afternoon, about 2 months after Meredith left, I got a message from my mom. She had joined a local book club, she said, and they were reading a novel about sisters who didn't speak for years. It made me think of you and Meredith, she wrote. Not because I expect anything, just because I finally understand some things I didn't before. I didn't reply, but I didn't delete it either. Maybe that was growth, maybe not. But I was learning to sit with complicated feelings instead of running from them. Meanwhile, Elijah and I were navigating our own quiet shift. He had been there through every storm, supportive, steady, patient. But now that the noise had faded, I saw how much I had kept him on the edge of my life. Like I was afraid he'd be taken from me too, or worse, turn on me the way my family had. But he never did. One night, while we were cooking dinner together, I asked him, "Why did you stay?" He looked up from the cutting board, surprised by the question. "You mean after everything with your family?" "Yeah, after everything." He set the knife down and leaned against the counter, wiping his hands on a towel. "Because I saw you. Not just the pain, not just the fight. You. And I believed in that." It was such a simple answer, but it knocked the air out of me. For so long I had lived like love was a transaction. If I was useful, I'd be wanted. If I was perfect, I'd be safe. But Elijah didn't want perfect. He just wanted me. "I'm sorry," I whispered, "for making it so hard to get close." He stepped forward and took my hands. "You've been surviving, Avery. Now you're learning how to live. I'm just glad I get to be here while you figure it out." That night, we stayed up late, talking about the future in ways we hadn't before. Not just business plans or expansions, real life, a home together, maybe kids, maybe not, travel, growth, joy. It felt terrifying and thrilling and free. But growth doesn't come without its tests. A few weeks later, I got an unexpected call. It was from a lawyer. Meredith had been arrested in Atlanta. Fraud. Again. This time, she had used our parents' names to secure a personal loan. Identity theft. I sat there, stunned, phone pressed to my ear, heart pounding in that old, familiar rhythm. Betrayal, rage, disbelief. "Why are you calling me?" I asked. "You're listed as emergency contact on her intake form," he said. She didn't have anyone else. Of course she didn't. I hung up. The old version of me would have spiraled, would have questioned every decision, would have felt guilty, responsible, torn, but not this time. Instead, I sat with Elijah that night and told him everything. We opened a bottle of wine and I cried. Not because I wanted to save her, but because I finally let myself grieve the idea of the sister I never had. "She's never going to change," I said, "and I have to stop hoping she will." Elijah nodded. Letting go isn't giving up. It's choosing peace. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. I didn't bail Meredith out. I didn't call. I didn't write. I let the system do what it was designed to do. Hold her accountable. Meanwhile, my parents, they changed. Not overnight, but slowly, genuinely. My father started volunteering at a community center, helping high school students with math. My mother began baking again, dropping off pies at neighbors' houses the way she used to before Meredith's messes consumed her. They even invited me over for dinner one Sunday, just me. No expectations, no drama, no guilt. I almost didn't go, but I did. They cooked fried catfish and cornbread, just like we used to eat on Sundays when I was a kid. My mother set the table with her best china. My father wore a collared shirt. They asked me about my work, about the quiet ones, about Elijah. They didn't bring up Meredith once. When dinner was over, we sat on the porch. The air was thick with the scent of magnolias and summer grass. My mother turned to me, hands folded in her lap. "I know we can't fix the past," she said, "and I don't expect you to forgive us overnight, but I hope we can earn back your trust, even just a little." I didn't respond right away. I let the words sink in. Then I said quietly, "You already earned the first step. You stopped pretending nothing happened." She smiled, tears in her eyes. My father nodded, silent, but grateful. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something I hadn't expected. Not pity, not triumph, but peace. Peace. Because I had stopped waiting for them to be the people I needed them to be. Peace because I had become the woman I needed all along. And no one could take that from me. It had been 4 months since Meredith's arrest when I received the letter. A real one. Not an email, not a text, not a voicemail I could ignore. A folded envelope in my mailbox, no return address, just my name written in handwriting I hadn't seen in years. My first instinct was to tear it apart without reading, to toss it into the trash where her messes usually ended up. But something stopped me. Maybe it was closure I didn't know I still needed. Maybe it was curiosity. Or maybe it was the final thread connecting the girl I used to be with the woman I had become. So I opened it. Inside was a letter from Meredith, written from a correctional facility outside Atlanta. It was dated 3 weeks earlier. The tone was different this time. Not arrogant or sugar-coated like before. Not performative, just raw. She told me everything. About how she got involved with Carter again, even after knowing who he truly was. About how she forged the signatures and justified it by convincing herself she'd pay it back once the next deal came through. About the moment she got caught, standing in a bank lobby with someone else's name on a document and the sound of sirens closing in. She wrote that she didn't expect forgiveness, didn't expect money, didn't expect me to come rescue her. She just wanted me to know that for the first time in her life, she was sitting still long enough to see the wreckage she'd left behind. She ended it with a single line that sat like stone in my chest. You were always the strong one, Avery. I just never had the courage to admit it. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I folded the letter neatly and placed it in the drawer of my desk, between an old sketchbook and a notebook filled with plans for the quiet ones. And then I went for a walk. The air in Jackson was warm and thick, but there was a breeze pushing through the trees along the sidewalk. I walked past the elementary school Meredith and I used to attend, past the bookstore where I had my first job, past the cafe where I met Elijah, where my whole life shifted with one simple question about my art, and somewhere between memory and pavement, I felt it. Release. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But freedom. And then, almost as if fate had been waiting for that precise moment, my phone buzzed. It was Elijah. "Babe, are you sitting down?" he asked, voice lit with excitement. I laughed. "I'm walking." "Well, you're going to want to stop. We just landed our first national contract, a full branding package for a tech startup out of Chicago. And they want you to lead it. Not just oversee, lead. You're going to be the face." My knees went weak, not because of nerves, because it was happening. Everything I had worked for, everything I had built from nothing. And now, it wasn't just about revenge or survival. It was about power, ownership, legacy. That night, Elijah and I celebrated with takeout and wine on our balcony. We talked about expanding the agency, about renting a second office space, about hiring another assistant. We talked about what our lives might look like in 5 years. 10. But somewhere between laughs and toasts, I turned serious. "I think I want to visit her," I said. Elijah set his glass down. "Meredith?" I nodded. I don't know why. Maybe it's closure. Maybe it's curiosity. But I need to see her. Not for her. For me. He didn't try to stop me. He just nodded and squeezed my hand. So 2 weeks later, I drove to Atlanta alone. I didn't tell my parents. I didn't make a big plan. I just showed up. The facility was cold and sterile, a far cry from the gilded life Meredith had always tried to construct for herself. They led me into a small visitation room with plastic chairs and glass walls. And then she walked in. Her hair was longer now, darker. Her face was thinner. She looked tired, but there was something new in her eyes. An absence of performance. A kind of stillness. She sat down across from me and didn't speak right away. "I didn't think you'd come," she finally said. "I almost didn't." She nodded. "Thank you for at least reading the letter. I didn't come to rescue you, Meredith." I know. There was silence between us. A long, heavy silence filled with all the things we'd never said. Then I asked the question that had haunted me for years. "Why did they always choose you?" She blinked. "Because I demanded it. And you didn't. That's not fair." "No," she said softly. "But it's true. You were easier to overlook because you didn't make them work for it. I manipulated. I lied. I needed. You just waited. And they gave me the attention because I screamed the loudest. But you were the one holding everything together." I swallowed hard. "That doesn't make it right." "No, it doesn't." She leaned forward. "But it made me realize something in here. I never hated you, Avery. I envied you. You didn't need their approval the way I did. You had your own compass. I never had that. I still don't." I didn't know what to say to that, so I just looked at her. And for the first time, I saw not my rival, not my burden, but a woman crumbling under the weight of her own choices. "I'm not going to send money," I said. "I'm not going to write or call. I didn't expect you to, but I'm not going to hate you anymore either." She smiled. "A small, broken thing. That's more than I deserve." When the time was up, she stood first. "You really made something of yourself," she said. "I'm proud of you." And then she was gone. I drove back to Jackson in silence, windows down, letting the wind carry away the last of my anger. When I pulled into my driveway, my parents were waiting on the porch. My mother had a pie in her hands. My father had something behind his back. "What is this?" I asked, stepping out of the car. "We wanted to give you something," my father said. He handed me a frame. Inside was one of my earliest drawings, a sketch of our house, done in pencil when I was about 10. I'd forgotten all about it. "You kept this?" I asked, stunned. My mother nodded. "We found it in an old box. We realized you were telling your story long before we were ready to hear it. I felt my throat tighten. You don't have to forgive us, my father said, but we're going to keep showing up anyway. And for the first time, I believed him. That night, I sat on my bed, the framed drawing on my lap, and I wrote something I never thought I'd say. I am no longer seeking approval from people who were never meant to hold my worth. This was my life, my rules, my voice. And from here on out, I wasn't waiting for anyone to choose me. I had already chosen myself. The morning after that conversation with my parents, I woke up before sunrise. The house was quiet, the streets still sleeping under a blanket of fog, and yet something in me felt weightless. I sat by the window in the kitchen with a cup of coffee, watching the first rays of daylight spill across the grass, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I was chasing something. I wasn't trying to earn a place. I wasn't running from a shadow. I wasn't building walls. I was simply here, whole. A week later, Elijah and I hosted our first community showcase for the quiet ones. We rented out a hall downtown and invited everyone. Students, mentors, families, even the mayor showed up. Our girls set up booths displaying their projects, apps they were developing, graphic portfolios, business pitches, photography series. As I walked through the room, listening to them explain their work with wide eyes and steady voices, I saw what legacy truly looked like. Not awards, not approval, but impact. These young women weren't waiting for the world to notice them. They were creating things too bright to be ignored. At the end of the night, one of our students, a girl named Jasmine, pulled me aside. She was 16, soft-spoken, a natural with code. She handed me a small envelope with my name on it and quickly walked away before I could open it. Inside was a letter, handwritten on lined notebook paper. You gave me permission to dream out loud, it said. Before you, I thought quiet meant invisible. Now I know quiet can mean power. Thank you for showing me that I matter. I had to step outside to breathe. I stood alone under the stars, hand over my mouth, heart pounding, and I cried. Not from pain, not from grief, but from something deeper. The overwhelming realization that I had broken the cycle, that my story didn't end with bitterness, that I had taken all the hurt, all the rejection, and turned it into something that would outlive me. It didn't erase what had happened, but it gave it meaning. A few days later, I sat with my parents again, this time at their house, my house, legally. But I had stopped thinking of it that way. I had no plans to evict them, no desire to dangle the deed over their heads. Power wasn't about control anymore. It was about knowing I had the right to say no, and choosing not to use it as a weapon. They had prepared dinner again. Simple Southern food, red beans and rice, cornbread, sweet tea. My mother told stories between bites, and my father laughed in a way I hadn't heard in years. Not forced, not performative, just present. At one point, my mom went to the kitchen to get dessert, and my dad cleared his throat. I never told you this, he said quietly. But when you left home at 18, I knew we had lost something we didn't deserve to lose. I looked up at him, surprised. I watched you walk away and thought, she's stronger than I'll ever be. And still, I let you go. I justified it. Told myself you were fine, that you didn't need us. But that was just an excuse. The truth was, I was ashamed. He looked at me then, eyes glassy. I'm still ashamed. I reached across the table and placed my hand over his. Shame only wins when you stay silent, I said. But you're here now. That's what matters. My mother returned, holding slices of pecan pie, and we let the moment settle like dust in sunlight. Not everything had been said. Not everything would be. But something had shifted. We were no longer pretending. We were acknowledging. And sometimes, that was enough. A few weeks later, I visited the prison in Atlanta one last time. Meredith's sentence had been reduced for cooperating with investigators, but she still had another year to serve. I hadn't written back. I hadn't promised a thing, but I went. This time, she looked better. Not polished, but lighter somehow, as if the mask had finally been dropped and left behind for good. I didn't think you'd come again, she said, sitting across from me. I didn't think I would either, I admitted. There was no dramatic music, no tearful embrace, just two women sitting in silence, bridged by blood and years of misunderstanding. I told her about the showcase, about the quiet ones, about Jasmine's letter. You're changing lives, she said. So are you, I replied, in your own way. Sitting still is a kind of transformation too. Meredith gave a small, sad smile. I still have a long way to go. We all do, I said. Before I left, I asked her a question I had carried for far too long. If you could do it all over again, would you choose differently? She didn't flinch. Yes, she said, but only if it would still bring you here, like this. And for the first time, I didn't doubt her. Back in Jackson, life moved forward. Elijah and I expanded the agency. We hired new team leads, moved into a larger office space. We took a week off to travel. Just us, no laptops, no meetings. We walked through the French Quarter in New Orleans, danced to jazz on street corners, watched the sun rise over the Mississippi River. One night, while we lay tangled in a hotel bed, he turned to me and asked, "Do you still think about the girl who left home at 18? "All the time," I said. "But not because I miss her. Because I'm proud of her. She walked away with nothing and built an empire." He kissed my forehead. She built a future. Years later, when people asked me how I did it, how I overcame the rejection, the favoritism, the betrayal, I never gave them a simple answer, because there wasn't one. Healing isn't linear. Growth isn't clean. Redemption isn't always deserved. But strength is quiet. Strength is choosing to stay soft in a world that made you hard. Strength is walking back into a house that never felt like home and deciding to make it yours anyway. My parents eventually downsized and moved into a small condo on the edge of town. I offered to help, but they handled it themselves. "You've done enough," my mother said with a smile. "Now it's our turn to stand on our own." They came to every showcase after that, sat front row, brought cookies, clapped louder than anyone else. They didn't try to rewrite history. They simply showed up differently, and that mattered. As for Meredith, she served her sentence quietly. When she got out, she didn't try to move back home. She took a job in Tennessee, started over in a halfway house, sent me one email every few months, always honest, never intrusive. One day, I received a package from her. Inside was a necklace with a small silver charm, the shape of a compass. The note read, "For the one who never lost her direction, even when no one else could see the map." I kept it on my desk, next to the framed childhood sketch of our house. Every time I looked at it, I remembered that girl at 18, backpack slung over one shoulder, determination in her heart, scars on her spirit. She didn't know where the road would take her, but she walked it anyway, and in doing so, she changed everything. 5 years passed. I often think about how different life looks now compared to the girl I once was, that quiet 18-year-old who walked away from her parents' house with nothing but a sketchbook and a backpack. I didn't know then what I was walking toward. I just knew I had to leave the noise behind to ever hear my own voice. What I found beyond that silence wasn't just strength, it was purpose. Today, The Quiet Ones has chapters in 3 states: Mississippi, Louisiana, and Tennessee. We've mentored over 300 young women, many of whom are now designers, engineers, and business owners. Some of them still call me Miss Langston, even though I beg them not to. Every time I step into a new classroom or workshop and see a girl hiding in the back, eyes lowered, notebook clutched tightly to her chest, I see myself. And I walk straight to her, because I know exactly what she needs. Not to be saved, but to be seen. Elijah and I got married in a small ceremony by the lake just outside of Jackson. We didn't do anything flashy. Just a few friends, close family, and the sun setting behind us like a soft exhale. My mother cried through most of the vows. My father couldn't stop smiling. And when I looked into Elijah's eyes, I saw a future I once believed I didn't deserve. Not because I was unworthy, but because I had been taught to shrink. Marriage didn't fix everything. We still had arguments, long nights, work stress. But it was real, honest. A partnership, not a rescue. And in that space, I thrived. I didn't need to be perfect. I just needed to be present. We bought a new house 2 years after the wedding, a craftsman-style place with wide windows and creaky floors and a sunroom that became my reading haven. We painted the walls together, hung up artwork from girls in our programs, and hosted Sunday dinners that filled the rooms with laughter. It wasn't grand, but it was ours. My parents downsized not long after. They sold the old house, my house, and moved into a smaller home in a quiet neighborhood near the park. They called to ask if I wanted anything before they moved out. I didn't think I would, but I ended up visiting one last time. The place looked so much smaller than I remembered. The living room that once felt enormous had shrunk with time. The walls, once towering, now seemed to fold inward, like the house itself was surrendering. My mother had boxed up photos, folded linens, and carefully labeled each box with sticky notes. But one thing caught my eye: a dusty folder at the bottom of an old cabinet. Inside were drawings, mine, dozens of them, sketches of buildings, trees, people, moments. Some were crude, scribbled with cheap pencils and torn paper. Others were more refined, later works I had made in high school, ones I thought no one ever cared about, but they had kept them, all of them. I asked my mom, "Why didn't you ever show me this?" She looked at the folder, eyes distant. We were too focused on what we thought success looked like. We didn't know how to nurture what we didn't understand. It wasn't an apology, but it was honest, and I could work with honesty. I took the drawings home, spent the weekend going through each one, and then I did something unexpected. I decided to create a gallery. Not a fancy commercial one, a community exhibit. I called it What We Didn't See. It featured artwork from women like me, the unnoticed, the quiet, the underestimated. The opening night was packed. There were stories on every wall, and standing in the middle of the crowd, I saw women of all ages wiping tears from their eyes as they recognized their own reflections in the frames. Meredith showed up. She stood in the back, hands clasped, not saying anything at first. I hadn't seen her in over a year. She'd been living in Nashville, working at a nonprofit for women re-entering the workforce after incarceration. She wore no makeup, no flash. Just jeans, a blouse, and a softness I hadn't seen before. When she finally walked over, I didn't flinch. I didn't retreat. "I'm proud of you," she said, eyes glossy. I nodded. "Thank you." "I didn't come to ask for anything," she added quickly. "I just wanted to witness what you've built." "That makes two of us," I replied. We stood together in silence, looking at a sketch I had made when I was 12, a pencil drawing of two girls sitting on opposite sides of a window, one inside, one out, both looking toward the sky. Meredith turned to me. "Do you think they ever meet?" I looked at the drawing and smiled. Maybe not in the same place, but maybe in the same direction. She didn't stay long, but she left something behind. A folded letter, no return address. I still haven't opened it, not because I'm afraid, but because some things don't need answers right away. Some stories are better left with an ellipsis instead of a period. Years later, I'm asked to speak at conferences, panels, events about female leadership, about resilience, about reclaiming identity. People call me things like visionary and trailblazer, and I always smile politely. But deep down, I know the truth. I was just a girl who got tired of not being chosen, and chose herself. In my office, I keep 3 things on the shelf behind my desk: the compass necklace Meredith gave me, the framed sketch of my childhood home, and the letter from Jasmine. When I feel overwhelmed, unsure, or small, I look at them. I remind myself that legacies aren't born from perfection. They're built from pain, patched together with grace, and fueled by the quiet fire that refuses to be extinguished. I still get letters from girls in the program. One wrote, "I used to think I needed to be louder to matter, but now I know I only needed to be heard by the right people." Another, "You taught me that being overlooked doesn't mean being invisible. It means I'm not done rising yet." That one made me cry, because the truth is, I'm still rising too. Every day I learn something new about who I am, who I'm becoming, and how far I've come. I don't need revenge anymore. I don't need apologies or validations or second chances from people who once missed me in the room. I have my voice, my story, my impact, and if I've learned anything through it all, it's this. Some of the strongest people in the world are the ones you never noticed, until they decided they would never be forgotten again. And I promise you, I won't be. Have you ever felt like the invisible one in your own family, overlooked, underestimated, and expected to keep quiet while others were praised? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story touched you, please like and subscribe for more powerful journeys of self-discovery and resilience. And if you know someone who's been silenced for too long, share this with them. Sometimes the greatest revenge isn't anger. It's rising beyond what they thought you'd never overcome. Thank you for listening to my story. You deserve to be seen, to be heard, and to be chosen by yourself first.